The next window of opportunity that we had as a nation to change things was 1997 with the election. But the Liberian people chose to put Charles Taylor into power, a man who had been a root factor from the 1990 up to 1997. Then the same people decided to remove him by the same technique of military violence, having already seen the past experience. So the question that comes to my mind is, how could this happen? And what can be our lessons now to protect against the repetition? Should we make reforms in our Constitution that give qualification to leaders? Because presently our Constitution has no specific qualification for leadership, just a certain age and a Liberian. But your nature of thinking, your past background, it doesn't care. So could you comment on that from your perspective?
Well, one of the fundamental tenets of democracy that, from time to time we may not like, but have to uphold and respect is that the people have a right to be wrong. There's nothing we can do or should do to prevent them from being wrong other than giving them information. The situation of the Taylor victory is a very complex one. I've even heard that he won in the BTC precinct. Just a year earlier, he was trying to annihilate them. I think there are a number of reasons for that. One factor is that the Liberian people were war fatigued. They believed that if Taylor did not win, the war would continue. So they thought that by giving him victory, they will have peace. The other factor is that his opposition, not necessarily political opposition in the campaign, but during the war, did many things to belittle themselves in the eyes of the public that led the public to believe that Taylor was this strong man who could bring all of them into the fold. When after the Akasomo Accord, the Ulimo J faction with Roosevelt Johnson and company gave Charles Taylor everything he wanted, including the Minister of Justice, the Director of Police, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Internal Affairs. They created a situation where the police director could order the arrest, the justice minister was justified, the foreign minister was justified to the international community, and the internal affairs minister was justified to the country. So they put themselves in a box, and everybody knew that they were selling out to Taylor. When Alhaji Nkrumah joined forces with Taylor to wage war on Monrovia in April of 1996, it told the country that Taylor is the boss of all of these guys. So let's make him president, he will control the rest of them. And, the war that came in 2003, it would be inaccurate to say the same people that voted for Taylor actually carried out the war. It doesn't take a majority to start a war. I think something like 25 people started this war in 1990 when they hit across the border. Okay, so it doesn't take a majority, so I don't believe that the majority opted for a war to remove Taylor. It was brought upon by those who thought the only way back to Liberia is through military action, and this is one of the central themes throughout this conflict. The people who started the war in 1989, Charles Taylor, Moses Blah, Prince Johnson, all of these people, there were people who knew that if they walked down the streets of Monrovia, there would be dead bodies. The people who started the war against Taylor were people who knew that if they walked down the streets of Monrovia, there would be dead bodies. And so they are able to form alliances with countries and individuals who supply them with weapons. People say they collect money to buy weapons. People don't have the ability to collect money to buy weapons. The money they collect is only goodwill money. Countries support them with the arms and ammunition that they need.
In the case of Liberia, who would be some of those countries that you would say helped us?
Well, definitely with the Taylor War, that help came from Libya through Burkina Faso and the Ivory Coast. You can typically tell who's supporting the war by which territory they're using to wage the war. In the case of the other war that came from Guinea, without the complicity of the Guinean government, I don't think those weapons could find their way to Liberia. They were not dropping from planes and fighting. They were coming through territories. And the fact of the matter is that Taylor also created a situation where the countries surrounding Liberia had a self-preservation need to see him defeated. The reason ECOMO moved into Liberia in 1990 was because it was discovered that Taylor had dissidents from most of the West African countries. And the plan that Muammar Gaddafi had was take over Liberia, establish a beachhead, then we'll move to these other countries. And we saw it manifest in Sierra Leone. He had Mohamed Touré, the son of the late Sékou Touré, with him as one of the dissidents, and the plan was to destabilize Guinea, and they actually did attempt that a few times. So the Guinean government had a self-preservation interest in dethroning Taylor. And so a central theme to this whole conflict is that the foreign policies of Doe and Taylor, as it relates to our neighbors, created insecurity for them. We remember back in the 80s when Doe sent troops to the Sierra Leonean border in response to a newspaper article. So we have to be serious about good relations with our neighbors.
So in the final conclusion, in this case, this is still impunity to the law. So would you recommend that such things be left alone in the case that the other country was defending itself in its perception of what our bad motivation on it, or should TRC seek some kind of reparation or other situation from those countries that brought an attack on us? In the case, for example, Doe, he was a legitimately elected president, but yet countries united together to support his overthrow. In the case of Taylor, he was a legitimately elected president, yet countries abroad put money and support together to support the overthrow. So in analyzing it, as we look and say, well, they were defending their perceptions, is it right? Is it wrong? What will be your thinking and feeling as a Liberian leader here?
I think we have to be practical. Mm-hmm. In the case of the Guinean government, there was provocation. Mm-hmm. The Taylor forces did attack Guinean villages at one time. Mm-hmm. In the case of Libya, there was no provocation. In the case of the Ivory Coast, there was no provocation. In the case of Burkina Faso, there was no provocation. And before I forget, I'm going to mention France. The French component of this, the iron mine in Nimba. In the Sékou Touré days, he wanted any investor who would extract that ore to build a train track to Conakry. That's such a long ways. And they said, no, listen, there's a railroad from here to Buchanan. It's not feasible for us to build this railroad, so we'll have to take it through Liberia. He didn't want to do it, but Lassana Conte finally agreed to do it, and they formed this venture called Mefergie. And France wanted that iron ore. And so they thought that by investing in Taylor, it would give them access to the ore. And throughout, they provided diplomatic, political, and military cover for Taylor. At the same time, they were taking out the blood diamonds. They were taking logs from Liberia. The iron ore was being shipped to France, and France did everything to give Taylor cover. In fact, even at some point, the French journalists also got involved because there is a link from from Agence France International, which is their version of the AP or the UPI, in which they quote that eyewitnesses said that the Nima Redemption Council people committed atrocities. That reporter was based in Senegal, and his eyewitnesses were quite likely NPFL people. I think you've also uncovered where NPFL coerced witnesses led the public to believe that the AFL committed the Carter Camp massacre, when now it's come out that these witnesses are now free to speak, that it was actually done by the NPFL. So the French have been collaborators, giving him political cover, public relations cover, and trying to demonize anyone that went against him.
So then you're recommending to us that for those that have no alibi, in a sense, or justification, we should seek reparation for the Liberian people from those
Yes.
nations. Thank you very much.